We are just days away from a Rugby World Cup. And not just any World Cup. The 2021, but played in 2022 because time is illusion, showpiece is almost nailed on to be the biggest and most exciting tournament women's rugby has ever seen. Since the last competition in 2017, the side of the sport has exploded. This, to all intents and purposes, is the first professional Women's World Cup, with more sides than not now professionalised and the number of teams able to bring style, skills and sky-high intensity now through the roof. So, as we move oh so close, it's time to dive into all 12 teams who will be tussling to lift this trophy, which, by not having a name at all, means it's named after just as many people who are involved in the creation of rugby as the Webb Ellis Cup. And I don't think there could be anywhere we could start other than the Red Roses, the nailed-on favourites. For anyone who hasn't been watching women's rugby the last few years, well, this tournament's giving you a chance to catch up on a team that just plays some properly scintillating rugby. Simon Middleton's England might be the best and most dominant team this sport has ever seen. Imagine the 2015 All Blacks if they had more depth and endless charisma, and you're pretty much there. This is a team that has a complete game and is impossible to dislike, something I think an infinite number brought up hating the English men's team will attest to with bafflement on our faces. It's also a side simply stacked with talent. Rugby has long since scoured the globe looking for the background that produces the hardest players. We've tried butchers, miners, farmers, scaffolders, steelworkers, former drug runners, nephews of notorious people, Georgians, gougers, even blokes who are happy to have their testicles ripped off during a game. But honestly, I don't know why it's taken so long for the sport to tap into the one kind of person nobody watching this video would ever mess with: mums from Yeovil. Simply put, Marley Packer might be the form player on the planet right now. After dominating the Six Nations, she ripped the Premier 15's title almost single-handedly, just dropped it into Saracens trophy cabinet. And here you are after that, and now looks to bring that kind of all-encompassing power onto the biggest stage of all. A ferocious ball carrier and even better jackler and tackler, Packer has been in form so good the likes of Emily Scarrett, Zoe Aldcroft, World Player of the Year, Jess Breach, Sarah Burns started to look like little more than support acts. The Red Roses are very close to being the complete picture. I did a deep dive into this just after the Spring Six Nations on why they're so good if you want a full 20 minutes on it, but after becoming the first women's side to fully professionalise at the start of their cycle, the team became almost instantly elite. They lost the last World Cup final to New Zealand by 9 points. Not only have they closed that gap, England last year opened an even bigger one when they served the Black Ferns their first and second biggest ever losing margins in history. This World Cup has two outcomes. Either someone defeats the most dominant team the world has ever seen and ends the longest winning streak international rugby has ever produced, or we get to witness a team we'll be telling our grandkids about, a side who single-handedly revolutionised rugby completely and forced everybody else to climb 60 stories to get close to their level, experience their greatest day. But in a properly thrilling twist, their biggest rivals will be all up in their faces from the off. For England have been drawn in the same pool as France. No team has pushed the Red Roses harder the last few years than El Bleu. The contests between the two have slowly become possibly World Rugby's single most don't miss fixture. And we might get it twice this tournament if things go as we kind of expect. France enter the 8th World Tournament with 6 third-place medals. Yet, if they can scrap into the showpiece, the finale on November 12th, it would be their first ever World Cup final. And make no mistake, this is a team who are dead set on making the most of their best ever opportunity to do just that. Whilst each area of their game is a few percent off England, there isn't really a notable weakness in this French team, but there are certain things that really do stand out above all else. Because there's no team quite like France for bullying the opposition into letting them produce world-class moments from their world-class players. Whether it's an impossible Laurie Sanzou's line break, a Jessie Tremoulier 50-22 out of nowhere, or Romain Ménager crashing smashing through defenders. France have endless stocks of players capable of game-changing moments. The second you get sucked into watching the destructive physicality of Safi Ndiaye or Madouas Afal, you've missed the fact Sanzus is 50 metres downfield, just given the assist pass. Boujard's just scored in the corner, unlucky. Frankly, Gaël Hermé's side are one of my favourites to watch in World Rugby. They're just amazing. They're like a parody of French rugby, yet coming together in compelling beauty and smash-up physicality when put under any pressure. The age-old debate between impossible creativity and brutal brawn that's defined French rugby for generations is alive and well, but also underpinned by another great French rugby cliche that I think, for those of you new to this, well worth familiarising with. Gives you a really good impression of who this French team are. For the first 2 years of this World Cup cycle, French coach Annick Hérault changed her halfback combination every single game. The fly half shirt shuffled constantly, with the 9-year-old flipping week on week between Laure Sanzus, who is Antoine Dupont. She's just Antoine Dupont, right? She's she's a France and Toulouse scrum half who's unusually strong, able to magic herself for any gap, has an astonishing kicking game. She's just Antoine Dupont. Just like, for ease, just imagine she is Antoine Dupont. And Pauline Bourdon, a channel favourite here, a far more dreamlike 9, who recently missed the Six Nations because she injured herself preparing an avocado for lunch. She couldn't be more French. And then, right, after 2 years of flipping and changing, Hérault had a genius idea. What if you say, pick them both? That was horrible. I should never do that accent again. That was really bad. But it worked, and she kept it. For the first time in 2 years, France kept hold of the same halfback combination for 2 games in a... Oh! Didn't Caroline Drouin make a big impact off the bench? Wasn't she great? Drouin then ousted Bourdon for the 10 shirt and was absolutely brilliant. Caroline Drouin's game and attack management is first rate, and France really were playing some lovely rugby with her pulling the strings. But noticing her foot didn't quite yet resemble the traction engine, Hérault had another brilliant idea to make France's game even more spectacular. Pick Jessie Tremoulier. I know she's a fullback, but just put her at 10. The master plan. Pick the World Player of the Decade. Just give her as much of the ball as possible. Put her in a 10. Proper under 12s tactic. Just put your best player at 10. And it worked. Drouin did nothing wrong, right? But if you were a coach and you woke up one morning and went, you could literally pick Jessie Tremoulier, you probably would just pick Jessie Tremoulier. She scored a try against Wales and put in maybe the most obvious player of the match performance of the Six Nations against Scotland, kicking endless 50-22s, using her kind of bullshit boot to France's gain. So, obviously, with a Grand Slam decider against their old rivals England on the horizon, France knew at 10 they had to pick Drouin. Yeah, who they then moved to 12 for the most recent World Cup warm-up game. This is a very long-winded way of saying this French team might be the Frenchest team that has ever Frenched. And literally anyone could turn out for them at 10. Like if they made the semi-final, right? I half expect to see Lionel Boxy starting there, only to be dropped for the final in favour of a literal spoon. Literally anyone could wear that shirt, but the most important thing to note about this France team is they almost always turn out to be world class. This French side are equally capable of kicking you off the park as they are dazzling around you or even bullocking through the middle. They're a side for a proper all-court game and threats across the park. There is one fascinating wrinkle, however, right? After the Six Nations, the French Union made the bizarre decision not to change Hérault's role, but to promote her assistant, Thomas Darac, to a new post above her, putting him now in charge of the team. And whilst it looked like business as usual, it looked like the same team they were in the Six Nations for the first World Cup warm-up against Italy, come the return game a week later, suddenly there are a few more concerns for and of Darac. Whilst World Cup warm-ups are always anomalies and you never want to read too much into them, they're not normally ones that do end for an overdog like this. It felt like, watching it, the kind of game where Italy would cause them problems, but France would eventually just pull away, run away from the second half. Except they didn't. Italy never gave in, just jumping on every mistake France made and scoring tries like this, just patiently exploiting errors and compounding them, allowing France to kind of hand them scores. And France kept making them. Getting into the 22 was no problem for France in this test, but scoring from those chances was another thing. Some of it was inaccuracy, lines of running, timing being off, things that can be solved in a few weeks of training before the World Cup, but others were just dumb decision making, just like really daft choices. I'm unsure why this changing and coaching took place, and whether it was 80 minutes of teething problems that produced longer term good results, but you can't deny this revolution, it's all very, very French. However, that upheaval is nothing compared to the other tournament contenders and host nation, New Zealand. If you thought the All Black struggles were dramatic, boy, oh boy, have you seen nothing yet. The Black Ferns have won 5 of the last 6 World Cups and stand as the reigning champions from 2017. And yet, oh, what a few years they've seen. Whilst France's very sudden coaching change came for baffling decisions nobody quite understands, the Black Ferns' sudden shift of boss is only surprising in the fact that it took so long. Last autumn, New Zealand, who had previously only lost 12 games in their history, lost 4 on the bounce. And by the first, second, third and fourth biggest margins they'd ever suffered. But this wasn't all. After arriving back from the tour, head coach Glenn Moore was hit by numerous accusations of bullying, misogyny, racism, cultural insensitivity, body shaming, and marginalising and belittling players not in the first team. Hooker Takura Nata Arangamate, a double World Cup winner, was told she was only in the team to play the guitar and spoke of how her management being yelled at for tiny things, any errors she made in training, being put on the sidelines, led her into a massive mental health spiral that left her lacking the motivation to play. These accusations kept pouring in, and yet the NZRU continued to and ah over action. Until April, when, following an investigation into his behaviour, the NZRU decided to play their usual rugby values card and back Glenn Moore for being a good rugby man, or whatever bullshit, and say yes, he's definitely staying in as coach for the World Cup, despite the fact that the players hate him. And so began a backlash, right? Not just from the fans and media, but even from the players themselves. A backlash so strong, Moore took it upon himself to finally do something decent and resign. This left New Zealand needing a new coach. And so they went for the coach. There's quite a decent argument to be made, right? That Wayne Smith is in the conversation to be the greatest rugby coach of all time. A man who flitted between attack and defence coaching for the All Blacks during their golden age because nobody but him could find ways around the attack he designed or the defence he'd created. He was thought to have retired after the 2017 Lions tour when he sailed off into taking an overseas role at the Kobe Steelers in Japan. But with the Black Ferns in crisis, here he is, back, and he's already labelled this one of the best decisions he's ever made in his life. It's reportedly a role he very much put himself forward for and marks the first time he's been in a top job since his spell at Northampton ended in 2004. This does leave some question marks. One of the most innovative coaches the game has seen, yet he's been away from the big time for a while and away from a big job even longer. How is he going to adapt? And how are the Black Ferns going to take to it? Things are looking pretty sharp so far though. Since he took over, the Black Ferns managed an unbeaten run and seem to be creeping back towards their old tricks again with a couple of big wins over Australia. However, more recently, he gave a bizarrely honest interview in which he talked about how England and France have to be favourites. Maybe it's mind games, maybe it's trying to take onus off his own team and pressure off them. But it's only going to make watching New Zealand even more interesting, as it's clearly something he's thinking about a great deal. The increased level of professionalism in England and France, giving them a bit of an edge that he's now needing to work a way around. He says he feels the answer is attacking rugby, really throwing everything at it, and boy do the Black Ferns have plenty of players who can pull that out of there. They're just absolutely stacked with talent. Kendra Coxedge has been a crucial player for the Black Ferns for so long now that the team has actually played more games with her starting at scrum half than without across their entire history. And she retires from rugby after this tournament. And she'll be looking to go out on a high. And around her are so many huge talents. I mean, Ruby Tui, former Sevens World Player of the Year, has come over to 15s this year. And I mean, if nothing else, you want to watch the Black Ferns just to see her post-match interviews. She is the most delightful human being alive. Portia Woodman scores more tries than I think there are other human beings alive. Rennie Whitcliffe, also, bloody, you can't stop her. She's an unbelievable talent. Stacey Flula, you can keep going through their team and picking out more and more and more names. There's so many outstanding players in this side, and you're going to have to see whether Wayne Smith can get the most out of them in these coming few weeks. It's possible this will all be too little too late from the NZRU, but we're just going to have to find out in less than a week when the Rugby World Cup 2020 kicks off for rugby. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. That is but part one of an ongoing preview on every team from this week. We're less than a week away now. World Cup is all coming up very soon. We're coming back in the next few days on Wednesday, as you're watching this right now, with the next part looking at Wales, looking at Scotland, looking at Italy, and looking at Canada, the teams that could potentially upset the three teams we talked about today, and then looking at the other teams after that on Friday, the day before the World Cup begins. We'll see you then for more of that. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Let's be happy. Let's compete safely and peacefully. Peace and love. Love you guys.
We love you too, Ruby. Good to see you.